And welcome back to the Defiant Spirit podcast and the Meaning Project podcast. As we were talking, getting ready for this introduction, we are back to give you, our beloved audiences, what you want. The return of Rabbi B and Dr. D to talk more things: logotherapy, Dr. Viktor Frankl, existential analysis, meaning, and purpose today. But before we get into that, B, how you been, brother?
I've been well, man. I miss our weekly conversations, but at least we're doing it, like bi-weekly, monthly, whatever it is. But here we are, back together again.
Yeah, it's funny. It was weekly at one point, and man, I think we saturated the market, right? Like we really, our people got quite a bit of it, and now, a distance makes the heart grow fonder. Because I've been hearing some great stuff on the just little bit we're letting out.
Yeah, no, I think we're not doing the podcast for good reasons because we're both doing so much in our respective, work and
Mhm.
personal lives. Want to hear what's going on with you. I've been working on the Defiant Spirit, really cleaning it up, getting it ready, taking it out. And that's my work around bringing our good doctor's legacy together with the Enneagram. And as far as I know, it hasn't been done. So I've been, pioneering some new good stuff in two great systems.
And could you, I mean, for the sake of the audience watching on YouTube, step aside just a little bit. Let's see that beautiful logo right
Yeah,
behind you. I mean, you got
yeah,
the
thanks.
Defiant Spirit, the Enneagram colors going on there. That is gorgeous.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I'm really proud of it because I've always seen myself as a spokesperson for both Viktor Frankl's message, which I do believe needs to be scaled now more than ever before. We got to get it out there, and the Enneagram, which oftentimes is sort of overshadowed by your great love of Myers-Briggs, which is a great system. But both of these traditions, I don't think have gotten their fair share.
Agreed. And I got to tell you, I have to argue with you there. Certainly not being overshadowed, because in my very first coaching clinical session of the morning, somebody brought up your work on this podcast with the Enneagram,
Oh, cool.
in almost an insulting way to the MBT. No, absolutely not insulting, but just comparing. And I thought, you know what? It's just amazing to see what kind of reach we're having here, but also what you're having with the Enneagram. So very excited to see how that keeps going. Love the new studio and logo. Some
Thanks, buddy.
beautiful work you got going on.
So tell us what's going on with your life.
Yeah, so a lot of coaching and clinical work coming up. A couple speaking engagements I'm working on. I have a local corporate engagement coming up in a couple weeks. I'm putting together a nice speech for their um, first annual corporate development day. So really excited to be a part of that. And with that, there's another therapist and I. We talk a lot about making better humans, helping people become better. And part of that work is also helping therapists do better work. So she and I are getting together and doing some work to offer continuing education to therapists. And then, of course, as you said, I love that word, scaling, right? This
Mm.
message deserves to be scaled. And what I'm finding in that clinical work, whether it's in my office here in Farmville, Indiana, or on Zoom, touching more people nationwide and worldwide, sometimes it's just not enough. There's only enough of us, a certain amount of us, you and I, be, to go around. And so I'm putting together some plans for next year to do some greater offerings, some more. Man, I tell you what, I love running groups. I always have, ever since my grad school days and my early work days. So I'd like to try to put together some different topical online Zoom groups to get the message out bigger and better than what I have been. So you can be looking for that in 2023 from 2023 from Dr. Dan and the Meaning Project.
Can't wait. Sounds like good stuff.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you and I will continue to meet as much as possible and share the good work of Dr. Frankl, as well as I wanted to bring this back out, right? I don't know if we've talked about this particular text. I know I've shared it with you. Viktor E. Frankl's Logotherapy and Existential Analysis, Theory and Practice. You guys, look how thick that book is. I mean, it is up there with the DSM. And silly me, I've got all of these tabs and notes in here because it's just that powerful. It's actually by two of our fellow peers with the Graduate Theological Foundation, Doctors Maria and Edward Marshall. I mean, they put together what I'm going to call the quintessential text
Hmm.
on Dr. Frankl, logotherapy, existential analysis. I mean, the beginning, the history is more than what I've read on his history anywhere before. So if it's something you're interested in, I highly recommend picking it up.
So, I of course I love him and his work. The challenge I have found is that most people can't crack the surface of most of his books. His
Mm.
most famous book, obviously, is Man's Search for Meaning, which is more narrative than I mean, it's half and half, I guess. The first half is his narrative. The second half is a pretty thin summary of logotherapy. And then I talk to people who always say, "Well, what do I read next?" And like they go down, Saying Yes to Life and a few others. But then it gets kind of thick and hard to read. So I'm glad there's more literature out there.
Yeah, I always encourage people to move on to Doctor and the Soul because it is broken down in such good component parts, right? You got the
Yeah.
meaning of work, the meaning of suffering, the meaning of love. But you're right. After that, it gets pretty dense. And I'll never forget the story hearing about, I mean, his writing was even worse before his wife, Ellie, would uh, edit it for him. I remember the story that he would speak to her and he would give all these amazing ideas, and she would say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, time out. You've really got to dial that back and explain it so people understand."
Mm.
And he was, prolific in his writing. I know his academic writing is far more than I can always quite understand. But yeah, this is an amazing text, and the good doctors, Marshall, do a great job of pulling in all kinds of research. Not just Dr. Frankl, but Alexander Bettiani from Europe, and Dr. Elizabeth Lucas, one of Viktor Frankl's students. A lot of great work in here, so some good stuff. But I thought one of the things you and I talk about as we take our message into uh, the corporate world, into organizations to try to impact more people in bigger ways. Um, what I've run into is this idea of meaning and purpose.
Hmm.
Right? I think I've shared many times on this podcast. I went to an amazing purpose summit last summer, and basically they were talking about a lot about meaning, but using the word purpose.
Mm.
And they seem interchangeable. So I thought maybe you and I could dive into that and see, if we go back 20, 25 years, do you remember the book? It went, I don't know, number one, like The Purpose Driven Life.
Sure, by Pastor, just blanked on his name. Yes.
Yes, good. Yeah, I remember. I mean, back then I was running adolescent substance abuse groups, and one of our, well, I think it was our nurse or our RN was actually using that book to work with the clients then, and some great results. I know people really liked it, and so I think purpose has gotten a really good connotation, and it's got a really good rap while we left meaning behind. So I thought, hey, why not bring them out? There's this nice little paragraph in the textbook here. Mind if I read to you for a minute, B?
Please, if I fall asleep, don't take it personally.
It's, yeah, just like my kids. So all right, here we go. Both meaning and purpose have been interchangeably used in the literature exploring finding meaning in life and work. Right, so that right there they talk about work. According to Marrero in a 2017 article, we can distinguish these two concepts by examining their roots in the Greek language. Now, B, I know the Greek language gets you pretty excited, so here we go, man. The Greek word for meaning is
Logos.
logos. Look at you, like you're reading the textbook with me, man. Right? So the Greek word for meaning is logos, which can be translated as reason or ground, the foundations and essence.
Mm.
Oof, that's beautiful. While the Greek word for purpose is telos, which refers to concrete action through which one reaches a goal. The two concepts are similar but different. Meaning is the ground of existence, its foundational reason and objective, aim and goal, while purpose involves directness in the pursuit of what is valuable to accomplish or actualize meaning.
Wow, love it.
Ooh, that is actually that's from Fabry back in '94, reprinted by Marrero in '17. So you want to take a stab at that first?
I do think they're used interchangeably, and I think it's a mistake to kind of mush up these words because each has power, right? They each offer us something different. So I'm glad you're making us really think this through. I always often have a conversation, I'm sure you do too, around one of the fundamental aspects of Frankl, which is, and I think we spoke about this in our last podcast, meaning isn't created, it's discovered.
I believe that was the title of our last
Okay.
podcast,
Yeah.
but roll with it.
I should pay attention to our podcast. But I have the conversation, if not daily, certainly multiple times a week, because I think there is a fundamental misconception of meaning, and that is right? I, Baruch Halevi, am imposing meaning upon a bad situation or a good situation, as opposed to the Franklinian, Dr. Frankl's philosophy of meaning, which is meaning exists whether or not little Baruch Halevi on planet Earth that, during this particular time acknowledges it as meaning or not. It's not up to me. I'm not that powerful. I'm not the source. There is a source, call source whatever you want, God or essence or universe or meaning. It's there. My humble work is to become a servant, to become a seeker of that in these difficult situations, to go into the circumstance and to discover it or uncover it. I'm not creating it. And why that's so important to me is because it's not about me. I'm participating in something bigger than myself. I am showing up and playing my part with a larger symphony. And yeah, playing my little cello on the end is important, but it's not the symphony. And so it just gives me a greater sense of purpose, right? To go into that meaning. And so the meaning is there. It's the essence. And we'll talk about that. The purpose is the work, is the mission.
It's the behavior. It's the action.
It's the behavior. It's the action. And that is a fundamental shift in the way I think most people think of meaning and purpose.
Absolutely. I mean, you described it so eloquently, right? Meaning is the ground of existence. No matter what we do, it is there. We cannot deny it. We cannot refute it. It's there. It exists. It is our role to discover it, to uncover it, as we've shared many times. And we take action. We seek out our purpose, our unique way of doing that. As the good doctor says, that we are all unique in our singularity and that we all have a task to accomplish. That task is our purpose. And in that purpose, we discover meaning in that ground of existence. And when we do, as we've talked about, we become healthier, more happier, more successful, whatever you want to call it. We find that meaning, and all these other positive aspects ideally are byproducts of it. However, as we know, they're not all always positive aspects. Sometimes suffering is a part of meaning as well.
And it doesn't require faith. I think this is a big shift. It doesn't, meaning exists whether or not 2 + 2 = 4, whether or not I have faith in it. Right? I don't have to have faith.
Obviously, you haven't done Common Core math, because I'm not sure that's true anymore, but that's another podcast.
So assuming that's still true, but there are truths that it doesn't need my validation. It doesn't need my recognition. I don't have to do anything. Right. And I think that's important because I have a hard time with faith. I don't fully understand what it means. I don't know if I have it, but I don't have to. The meaning is there. I guess I do have to have faith that this system works and it's true, but the meaning is there. I just have to go into it to discover it. And it doesn't depend on me to believe in it. Do you believe in this? Do you not believe in this? I don't know. All I know is when I go into that experience, I have never come away with anything less than the meaning, with anything less than the knowing that something is there. Right. And so I guess I say that because we live in a world right now that is so focused on, faith-based propositions. I don't care if they're religion. I don't care if we're talking about politics. There's so much. What do you believe? Right? And so this, what I love about Frankl, there's nothing you have to subscribe to. You don't have to make any affirmation statements. I believe. Same with the Enneagram, by the way. You don't have to make any statements of faith. Just enter it, go into it, experience it.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, experience it. That draws me back to the shared meaning triangle, right? You don't have to believe in it, but when you go experience things of a meaningful sort in life, you feel it. You feel it differently. Whether you believe it or not, you stand on that mountaintop looking at these beautiful fall colors and you say, oh, I feel that. I feel something there,
Yeah.
right? Or you go create a work, you create, the defiant spirit in all your work in the Enneagram, and there's a higher calling there, that I'm going to go back to a statement you said that transcends the self. So whether you believe it or not, when you step outside yourself and that existence of meaning because you feel different. You feel more whole, more healthy, more well. I'm not sure what it is. We just know. And maybe that brings us to that issue in defining faith that we don't always know or feel it, as well as meaning. You and I have danced around this idea of defining it, and I think we feel we did a pretty good job of it. But still, it can be pretty ethereal sometimes, much like the idea of faith.
So how does that then shift us over to purpose? That's where um, I think it's so important to make that shift because, I've dealt a lot with grief counseling in my life. And one of the mistakes I see made around grief counseling, whether it's a formal counselor, whether it's a clergy or just a well-intentioned friend, is we talk about surviving,
Mm.
right? And that is a starting point. You need to survive your loss, but then you need to go beyond surviving because surviving is not a purpose, right? Surviving is a basic function of animals and human beings to stay alive. But we're not here. This is what, Frankl embodied this, not just taught it. We're not here just to survive. Right? When your loved one dies, yes, start by surviving. But if you only survive after that, you're not honoring them. You're here to live. And that's a purpose, right? That's the shift from, yeah, I'm going to find meaning, I'm going to find essence, I'm going to find something that's true, right? Logos true and take it with me. Now what? Well, now I got to live it. I got to share it. I got to grow it. That's purpose. So it's taking this meaning and doing something bigger with it.
Absolutely. It goes beyond surviving the loss to thriving in it, as we often say, turning that suffering into some kind of achievement or accomplishment, as you said, doing something with it. And I think that's why purpose is so much easier, especially for us in Western culture, to define. We are an action oriented culture, right? And so purpose is all about action. It's behaving, it's making a choice, creating a plan, and moving in a direction. Well, yeah, we can define that pretty well. And in doing that, in living out our purpose, we discover this ground of existence. We find meaning in all these different ways. If we take that into the work environment, the supervisor, the boss, the business owner, even the employee that finds their reason to get up and go to work, that is beyond just making a dollar or making many dollars, whether that's serving the community, serving a greater cause. Sometimes it's just serving each other, the person down the line from you. When we go about that behavior, that purposeful, intentional action, regardless of what it is, as long as we go about it with that attitude, we can certainly find meaning.
And that's why I think Frankl so often quoted Nietzsche of he or she who has a why to live for can endure anyhow, because you need that why, which to me is synonymous with purpose,
Mm.
right? It is taking the essence, right? The nous, the spirit, whatever, that's ephemeral. That's for you to kind of feel your way through and just know, not believe, but just know you get there. And now you got to translate it into reality, right? And you got to come back to that why, right? Back to, I think the best example I can come up with is, again, somebody dies in your life. You've got to find something, the mystics call it the sparks of divinity, sparks in the dark, go into it, find it, and then do something with it, right? Pops into my head, mothers against drunk driving, right?
Mhm.
Started because a mother lost her child and she went into it. She found something of worth that she could educate others so this would never have to happen again. And then she turns that into her why and she starts translating it into reality. And now it doesn't bring back her daughter and it doesn't replace her daughter, but it does make it meaningful. It does translate it into light. for others. And then I don't know, but I imagine that light carried her through the darkness forward, and that's purpose.
Absolutely. And if I remember correctly, you here in front of me may have actually written a book about finding those sparks, right?
Ah,
Through those difficult times. I believe
ding,
it was
ding, ding.
called, yeah, look at it, Spark Finders, right?
Spark Seekers, close.
Spark Seekers. Ah, so close. Beautiful book. Love that book.
Oh, thank you.
Great book for anybody struggling, suffering through loss. And if I can try to walk my way through one of Dr. Frankl's most favorite off-quoted stories, when he was talking to the physician who lost his wife. The physician could not get past his wife dying, and so he seeks out Dr. Frankl, who says, I mean, not even a full session, right? This was probably a 7-minute Dr. Viktor Frankl session. He said, well, what would have happened if you survived and your wife would have stayed, or if you would have died and your wife would have survived? And the physician says, well, she would have suffered unimaginably without me. And he says, exactly. And you are here to suffer for her so that she didn't have to suffer. And with that, the physician, found that he didn't have to carry out some great action. He didn't have to create an entire organization. That helps sometimes, but just finding out within himself that he could recognize, I am here so my wife didn't have to suffer any longer. He was able to find meaning in that.
Well, he was able to find meaning and translate it into a purpose, which is
Mm-hmm.
to stay alive, right? To carry, my language, to carry her fire, to carry her
Mm-hmm.
meaning. That's a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this when I'm counseling or talking to somebody who's going through loss. I love sharing this famous quote. I don't know. I think just attributed it to Anonymous, but a person dies two deaths: once when their body dies, and once when their story dies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing we can do about physical bodily death, but we can. The defiant spirit. We can defy a second death for our loved ones. How? By telling their story, whatever that means, however that means, but that's a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now I not only can stay alive, I want to stay alive,
Mm-hmm.
and that's purpose.
I think there's a more grim version of that statement too. That says people die two deaths. The first time is when their physical form dies, and the second time when their name is uttered for the last time. And I think that's something that any one of us that struggles, of a certain age and hairstyle, that struggles with that existential angst, that recognition that our time here is finite, and very often that can be motivation, not to seek the infinite, not to become a legend in our own mind or in the mind of social media, but to do something impactful that helps others. And as you and I have talked many times, B, I mean, we are certainly blessed in our vocation to be able to touch lives on a daily basis. Um, but there are other ways that people do that as well, by doing that self-transcendent work, by turning a purpose, a behavior, a daily reason for getting up and discovering meaning in it.
Yeah, and I remember reading Frankl talking about the gift of that stop, the supernal stopwatch that's ticking for all of us, right? And without that, I wouldn't have the urgency, right, to manifest my purpose, to live my purpose, to otherwise, I'll just get to it someday. And we need that stopwatch, and we need to remind ourselves that the stopwatch is ticking, and I have X amount of ticks to live the purpose. So what's your purpose? And
Mm-hmm.
find it. And then now's the time, not someday, not Monday. This isn't the New Year's resolution or the diet. It's now.
Right. Right. And I think that's so true. Too often we put off, I mean, procrastination is a very powerful tool in our world today, that I'll get to it tomorrow or next month, or I'll wait till that New Year's resolution. But no, you're exactly right. Time is ticking. We only have so much. And that's what makes life amazing, according to logotherapy and many other philosophies, by recognizing the finiteness of our time here. It gives us a reason to seek that purpose, to do it um, quickly, efficiently, to find it and to enact it, to engage in it,
Mhm.
so that we can discover that meaning. Because you're right, unless you're a Marvel superhero or any one of the other infinite characters there, you only have a certain amount of time.
And I think we should really, make sure our listeners understand that purpose, like you said, doesn't have to be starting a nonprofit and changing, society and blah, blah, blah. Like it can be to stay alive. I remember after my father took his life, that was my second experience. My grandmother took her life. And I just remember that my core purpose in that moment, and still is to stay alive. Because if I do, I break the chain, right, of generational suicide. And if I do that, then my children have they no longer see it as an option. Because if I were to kill myself, right, grandmother, father, son,
Mhm.
now my kids are looking, saying, this is a viable option,
Right.
right? So just staying alive might be a purpose. It can be, and it can be much smaller than that, but there's all kind. And I would just add that it's probably better to call them purposes, because I don't think it's a one and done.
Mhm.
Lots of purposes for each of us.
Well, absolutely. By finding new purpose every day, every week, every month, every year, every 5 years, whatever you want to do, then we only give ourselves more opportunities for meaning. Maybe that purpose today is to start a business and then grow a business and then hire more people to give them an opportunities for life. Maybe it is something as theoretically simple but practically difficult of just staying alive in the face of all that suffering and generational suicide. We all get to make that decision every day. I've shared it often. We all get to make it the very first time we hear that alarm go off. Do we engage in the that heroic moment of awakening and jump out of bed and not hit snooze, or do we maybe take 5 or 10 or 30 minutes a couple times, right? I know for me, I want to have that heroic meaning and I want to find that purpose. And sometimes it doesn't always work, but we get to choose. As Dr. Frankl tells us, we have the meaning of the moment. We get to choose every moment. We have meaningful decisions, or we can choose to procrastinate and let them pass us by.
I would say for our listeners, because one of our listeners told us they really like some practical, wisdom tidbits,
Mm,
whatever. And here's one. I like to read about other people's purposes. I like to read about famous people and how they understood their purpose. So, I've been doing a lot of reading right now around just some of the ancients.
mhm.
And it's just inspiring to witness other people's purposes.
Absolutely. That I think honestly that goes back to if you want to get a heavy textbook and get deep into Dr. Frankl's life. I got a comment, B. I mean, you've got some fairly insightful listeners. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I know I've gotten some wonderful feedback from many of my listeners. The last one just simply said, you got to get rid of those headphones on YouTube. I mean, they just said, like, how about you go find a different purpose than dogging me on YouTube, bud? But um, I think that's the great thing. You're absolutely right. Practical knowledge, choosing every day when you wake up. What is my purpose going to be? How am I going to behave to, as we talk about, transcend myself, impact others, either experience amazing things that help me discover meaning, or create works of art, music, um, create things that help me find meaning, or to choose. Sometimes we don't have those options to experience or create. Sometimes it's just a battle to choose our attitude in the face of difficulty or suffering that helps us discover meaning.
But I would say I would challenge, some of our listeners who are just going to put down, like, like me, to the podcast and say, yeah, that I have a purpose. Well, what is it? I've been working, as you have, lately, in corporate settings, and really talking to people at a deep level about the mission of the company. And the
Hmm.
companies that I'm working with have very clear missions, like very clear purposes. Then I shift the conversation and I say, so what's your purpose?
Hmm.
And they start rattling off cliches. I say, and I basically call bullshit. I say, you know what? You don't get to use a cliche as a purpose. I mean, if it's true, articulate it, write it down. Like, tell me
Hmm.
exactly what do you, Dan, stand for?
Mhm.
and not on platitudes, but like, what's your personal mission statement, your purpose statement? Most people haven't gone there. This is an opportunity to write it down.
Oh, no, it's so much easier to diffuse that responsibility and engage in corporate ego stroking and consultation, to have somebody help us create that, right? And don't get me wrong, I love doing that work in different small businesses and organizations. It's a very powerful moment, but you're exactly right. Just as powerful as doing that in a group or an organization is doing that for ourselves. And one of my favorites is we can reflect on what Dr. Frankl himself says. What was his mission in life? Well, the meaning of his life was to help others to discover meaning. Um, yes, okay. So I cannot use his obviously because he's a little bit more famous than I am, but um, I think that is something you and I definitely engage in regularly. But then how do we do that? What is the purpose? How do we enact that every day?
Well, the how is important, and maybe that's our next podcast. But you
Mhm,
got to start. You got to start with why. Simon
mhm,
Sinek, he or she who has a why can endure any how.
mhm,
So starting with why, starting with your purpose, nailing it down, owning it, right?
mhm,
Reciting it as a mantra, as a prayer, as a whatever you want to call it, every day.
mhm.
I have mine, and mine's a couple paragraphs long. I recite it by memory every single morning, every single night, and it just keeps me on the path.
Wow.
So
That's I feel like in some ways I've been challenged. I appreciate that because, like I said, I'm lucky just to stop hitting the snooze button some mornings and get up and get after some coaching or clinical work. So maybe I should take the time to do that as well. And if I'm going to do that, I mean, heck, that's a heck of a challenge for the rest of our audiences out there, for the for the company owner that's getting up and encouraging his people to go out and build cabinets or install countertops. What's your purpose? For all those teachers out there, and we know I have a few listeners who might be teachers. Why, as Simon Sinek does tell us, start with why. Why do you get up and go do that? Because it's got to be for more than a paycheck, or else you wouldn't do it.
it's also got to be more than just the way you're manifesting it, because you can be a teacher and not have a
Mhm,
classroom. When you retire, you'll still be a teacher, right? So
mhm,
what's underneath the actual, or the business person, right? You're going to retire, you're going to sell this thing, you're going to move on, you're going to have to at some point. You shouldn't lose your why. You
mm,
should just change forms. So it
yeah.
should be big enough and bold enough and broad enough that it can withstand the circumstances. And so, yeah,
I think that's an important statement that we've talked about before. When we lose that why, many times we call that retirement, or moving out of the business, or selling the business, or changing our work environment. But if we have that why, if we have that North Star, if we have that purpose, well, then we continue in what we're doing. We just, as you said, manifest it in a different way, still allowing ourselves many opportunities to discover meaning and to help others.
that's right. So that's the work. That's the why. That's the purpose. And I think that's the continuation of this idea that we are here to discover meaning, right?
Mhm.
And take that meaning and translate it into the why, into the purpose, and live it in all aspects of our life.
And by behaving in that purpose, by acting out that purpose every day, we discover that meaning. Now, B, can I put you on the spot and say, I mean, if you recite this every day, are you going to share it, or are we going to save that for another episode?
I'm happy to do it. So here we go. I am Baruch Halevi. I've been chosen by you to be an example of what is possible. My purpose for being here is to serve, protect, provide for, honor, and love my wife, my family, my community, my country, my clients, my people, my tribe. My mission while here is to inspire others through speaking, writing, guiding, teaching, leading them down a path of vision, integrity, courage, compassion, honor, hope, responsibility, and truth. I am a warrior. I'm a warrior body. I'm a warrior mind. I'm a warrior spirit, and I will warrior through. I say it multiple times every day when I feel like I'm losing myself or straying.
Oof, that is beautiful and powerful. Can I ask you what brought you to that point? And look, I'm being selfish. I want to know, but I'm sure it would benefit our audience to know, how did you come to that point? How did you come to creating that and then memorizing it to recite it?
Um, I struggled deeply after my father killed himself.
Mhm.
It really shook me to my core because he was this very successful man, human being on seemingly every level. He
Mhm.
had everything that I was told I was supposed to strive towards, and then he killed himself, and it rocked my foundation. And I knew that if I'm going to defy, again, not be a third generation of suicide, that I'm going to have to drill down and not just talk in these platitudes, but live it. And so, as a Jew, when I was observant, I would pray 3 times a day, the formal prayers of the tradition. The problem is that I was just going through the motions. They're not mine, right?
Mhm.
I'm reading somebody else's mission statement.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, basically I said to myself, fuck this. I'm going to write my own prayer, my own mission. And I'm going to recite it every day, 3 times a day. And I'm going to, like I thought about Tuesdays with Maury.
Mhm.
And what would it be like to die of ALS, which, maybe I will end up having to face? What would it be like for your body to shut down and you to just be lying there and only with your thoughts? Well, I want something. This is my, um, you know, Lord's Prayer. This is mine.
Mhm.
And so if that's all I have, then I'll just recite that in my head until the very end. But I wanted something that was mine, that could save my life, honestly.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It truly is, and what an amazing example of turning suffering into something, creating something so meaningful.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
Um,
brother.
I hope our audiences take that and look. B, I'm sure it took you a while to come to that and cultivate it, but you guys just take take the next few moments and maybe come up with the first line of it, right?
Oh,
And I want to reflect. You started out with "I am." And I
mm,
remember in a previous podcast a few weeks ago, an individual I was working with said, "You know what? I've discovered that those are the two most powerful words in the English language. I am." And then you just allow that to continue. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's some good stuff. And you certainly illustrated it there.
that'd be a good conversation for the next podcast. I am. Where does it come from? Why is it so powerful? Because it's
Hmm.
ancient and
Hmm.
it's relevant. So there we go.
I think the next one you and I do should be "I am," and I love when you go into the ancient historical meaning, not just the Greek but beyond, of our favorite word, logos. So I think it's a date, man.
All right, brother. I look forward to it. Until then, just keep discovering the meaning.
Outstanding. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.